your pain or stage fright or tension isn't the problem. It's the path. Why musicians must reclaim their deeper purpose. So most musicians think that their biggest problems are things like tension, stage fright, or like injuries and pain. But what if these aren't the real issues at all? What if these symptoms are pointing you to something deeper, something your training probably never touched? My name's Joseph Arnold, and I'm a violinist, an Alexander Technique teacher, and director of the Soulforce Arts Institute. And today I'm going to show you why the root cause of your performance blocks isn't something wrong with your body or your emotions or who you are or your creativity, your creative energy. It's rather a disconnection from your sense of purpose. So let's start at the beginning. What do musicians want? Musicians, in general, want to be able to express themselves freely, to get in touch with something beautiful inside and be able to bring it out into the world through sound. And I love that. I'm a musician, I'm a professional musician, I'm a violinist, and all my students, when I ask them, they say something similar. This is a pretty universal desire. And yet, a lot of us experience certain blocks that get in the way of that desire. And things like injuries and stage fright and self-doubt and creative blocks of all kinds. And so first of all, you can know that if you're experiencing these kinds of things, you're not alone. So many of us experience things like that. I had my own version of that with terrible repetitive strain injuries and performance anxiety. Right? This is so common. And there are also a lot of solutions out there, or things that seem like solutions, and you've probably tried a lot of these yourself if you're watching this video and you're looking for solutions. If you have tightness in your muscles, you probably tried relaxing, or relaxing things like massages or stretching or exercises, and you've probably noticed that those help a little bit, but not permanently. And if you have stage fright, you might have tried certain kinds of visualizations or even like beta blockers, or just gritting through it. And you might have noticed certain downsides with those as well. Like beta blockers, they actually reduce your emotional expression. They sort of put a cap on your emotional connection while you play. And gritting through it, well, I mean, that might work, but then your experience of playing music is terrible. It's just full of fear. And is that really what you want? Is that really what you got into this for? So these are all partial solutions. They are band-aid solutions, not root cause fixes. And what I'm interested in, and what I hope you're interested in, are the root cause fixes. So I'll give you an example. In working with so many of my students, when, for instance, they are holding excess tension in their body while they're playing, and maybe they're, just feeling tight, or their technique is kind of awkward, or they're getting fatigued while they're playing, then I often have a conversation with them about what are they noticing, and especially what are they thinking about that's causing the tension. I'll ask them a question like, if your tension, if the fatigue or whatever they're experiencing could talk, what would it say? And almost universally, it's some version of, I gotta get it right, or I have to do it fast, or I need more control. But it's usually they're just really focused on trying to get it right. Maybe that sounds familiar to you. And so I asked them, is this really why you got into playing music? Because, if that thought is causing all these problems, then maybe there's a different thought, a different intention that you can bring to your music making. And I don't know about you, but just getting the notes right is not the reason why I got into playing music. And it's not inspiring at all. Like, yes, it's important to get the notes right, but if that's all you're focused on and you're practicing and you're performing, then what are you doing? And of course, my students realize this like right off the bat. They say, no, that's not my purpose. That's not what brought me to playing music in the first place. And so I'll ask them, well, what did? And they'll usually answer with some version of to be able to connect with others, or that feeling of transcendence or inspiration, the healing power of music. And I say, when they say something like that, I say, yes, that's exactly it. Now play the same passage with that intention in mind. And usually what happens is a total transformation in their musicality. Their body relaxes, the musical expression flows, it just sounds so much more rich, their sound quality improves so much. Right, there's a really, really important shift here that has to do with what your underlying purpose is. And what I do, my job in teaching, is to help my students recognize when they're misaligned with their larger purpose. And what I might say is the the true purpose of the arts in general. So, what is that true purpose? Does music and art have excuse me, a higher purpose than just getting it right? So again, getting it right is important. If you don't get the notes right, you don't have good technique, then you can't do what you want to do. But the point is that technique is subservient to this higher purpose, which is, in my words, to bring us more to life. To bring us more to life. That's what music is about. And that can look like a lot of different things. Again, inspiration, healing, connection, bringing us together. Putting us, like reminding of us our connection to something larger than ourselves. Think of all the great works of art. And maybe you've had experiences like this as a performer or as an audience member, or seeing a certain painting or something like that, or architecture, where you just go, wow. Like, what is that wow? What is that spine-tingling kind of quality? Well, that's what the arts are meant to do. Putting you in touch with something larger than your individual self, bringing you more to life. And so this is not something that I came up with. This is something that I got from my students mostly, and from my own journey, gleaning this message that was always underneath all my students' problems. Like, it's right there, right underneath. And now we got these birds having a lively conversation in the tree next door. Okay, so when you try to create disconnected from this larger purpose, the true purpose of the arts, then you get all these problems that you've been probably experiencing. The tension, the fear, the self-doubt, the inner critic, the injuries, stage fright, all that stuff, all of these are signs of disconnection from the true purpose of the arts and your own unique version of that, what I call your artistic purpose. And so, in other words, your struggles are actually a doorway. They're not a problem to be fixed and gotten out of the way of, so you can keep operating in the same way. That's not going to work. Your current mode of operation is what's causing these problems. And the good news is that there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your body. Even if you've had chronic injuries, there's nothing wrong with your body. Even if you've had chronic, crippling stage fright, there's nothing wrong with your emotional self, or like who you are as a person or as a creator. Nothing wrong. If you've had terrible, inner critic and creative blocks, there's nothing wrong with you. These are all signs of being disconnected from your larger purpose, and the process of getting back in connection is very simple. So basically, And I'll share a little bit more about that at the end. But basically, if you treat your symptoms as messengers and not enemies, then you have access to such immense freedom and creative power. And this is the stuff that I love teaching the most of all, because to see this open up in my students is just such a joy. And to hear their music blossom is, yeah, really wonderful. It's everything you could possibly want in the musical act. So before I share a little bit more about exactly how to do this, I want to share one more thing, which is some of what I'm saying could be dismissed as, I don't know, too spiritual sounding. And you know what? I'm going to claim it and say that it is spiritual. But it's a kind of spirituality that is also very practical, which reveals that what you have inside you to express why you're here, why you became a musician in the first place, is actually there's some sort of sacred task for you in this. And all the problems that you've been experiencing are because you've forgotten what that sacred task is, or you haven't articulated it clearly enough for yourself. You haven't allowed enough space for it in your life. And what I see people trying to do is all these band-aid fixes, strengthening and stretching for injuries. Like, it's going to help a little bit, but that does not solve chronic injuries, repetitive strain injuries. I know this firsthand. And so that's just a band-aid. And then beta blockers, or gritting it through, or over-practicing when you have stage fright. Those are not root cause solutions. You're just going to keep having your stage fright, pushing it off, or dampening your experience of playing music. Is that really what you want? No. It's not what I want. It's not what any of my students have wanted. And I'm sure that it's not what you want. What you want is that, again, that experience of what I call Soulforce, that aliveness just pouring through you, that is possible to reclaim. And so, even though what I'm talking about here does have a spiritual message behind it, it's also the most strategic, the most practical solution. Because if you keep doing those other things, even though our society might say that these are practical and concrete solutions, they aren't, because they don't actually solve the problem. The problem is a spiritual one. And for that, you need spiritual solutions, like getting in touch with your deeper purpose, your artistic purpose. So, in other words, to get in touch with your soul force, your X factor, that thrilling, mesmerizing quality that makes your audiences lean in, listen, and remember to be transported by your music. You don't need to get rid of any of your symptoms. Or another way of saying that is that none of your symptoms are actually blocks. They are doorways to your greatest musical expression and connection and power. And so here's what you can do to actually realize this in your life. So what symptoms do you have? Is there tension or fatigue or stage fright or whatever it is? Have a little dialogue with this symptom and ask it what it wants to say to you. You could, the question is, if X, your symptom, could talk, what would it say? And just be open to any answers that arise. You might get answers in terms of emotions or other feelings, or like a little voice inside that whispers some message, or a symbol maybe, or I don't know, some kind of energy moving through you, an intuition of some kind. And keep dialoguing with this part of you until you understand what it's trying to do. And then, if it's some version of I got to get it right, ask yourself, is that really why I got into music in the first place? Is that what I was born to do, merely getting it right? And then ask yourself, well, if that's not what I was here to do, then what am I here to do with my music? And really let yourself be open to some new answers coming in. Don't dismiss what comes up. That dismissal is part of what's keeping you stuck. Just let new answers arise, and just, see if that you can let them digest in your body somehow. This is not merely a mental exercise. Let it have some resonance in your body. That's how it becomes real. And so once you do that, then maybe you can make a little phrase out of that, a mantra of some kind. My artistic purpose, or I became a musician to be able to X, or music means X to me. And put that on your music stand. Put that in your case. Put that in your wallet. Remind yourself when you're going on stage. Remind yourself when you're practicing, when you're teaching. This is what it's about. Yes, we're going to work on getting the notes right. And the whole reason to do that is because of this purpose that you have inside you already. So, if any of this resonates with you, I hope that it does. And I also have a free resource down below that you can access on getting in touch with your musical X Factor, your what I call Soulforce. A lot of people call it X Factor. And yeah, it's a free PDF, goes into a bit of detail and has very practical, some how-tos in there. And I feel confident that by the end of that, you'll be able to make some really good steps towards discovering your own X Factor. Okay. Otherwise, if you're curious to learn more, you can visit soulforcearts.com. I have a book, a multi-award-winning book called Soulforce: How to Discover Your Artistic Purpose, Create More Freely, and Make Art That Matters. I go into all this kind of stuff in the book. That's why I wrote the book. And you can also book a call with me and maybe take some lessons and how to uncover all of this for yourself if you wish to go deeper. Okay, that's all for now. I'll see you next time.